Right. So, which ones of you here are or want to be entrepreneurs? Right, it's quite a bunch. Which ones of you would want to be or are an entrepreneur because of the freedom that you think comes along with it? Right. Who of those also have an issue with authority? Right. Thank you, Paul. Thank you. I know I say aye or yes to all three of those questions, and I think that there is a very thin line between always wanting to do things your own way, going against the grain, and at some point just going all in and becoming an entrepreneur. Yeah, so therefore my idea is that entrepreneurship is a feeling that grows inside you subconsciously, and that it is nurtured, so that it is something that you grew up with, you were taught when you were little, and that everything that you picked up then shapes into what you want to become in adulthood. So, yeah, except for, well, maybe when it isn't, maybe when you grew up not liking the things that you saw happening around you. But for the sake of this talk, I won't be going that way. I'll be going with the former, meaning that, everything that has influenced you or has been a major factor in your life when you were little will shape what you want to achieve in adulthood. Right, so for as long as I can remember, I knew I always wanted to be an entrepreneur. Sounds a little bit cliche, but here we go. And as it turns out, my very good friend and partner in Bozu Beverages, Brent Koolhof, has always felt the same. So that was easy for us. Now, we come from Delfzijl, which is a small town pretty close to Groningen, actually. And we grew up there, went to the same schools together. And as soon as we hit high school, where you have to start plotting out all your courses, all the classes that you're going to take to shape your dream career that you're going to be fulfilling after high school, we found some common ground. And the common ground that we found was that we immediately felt that the high school curriculum or the school curriculum was was something that you had to do, but you could have a little fun while you were on that ride as well. It wasn't it was a means to an end to us. It wasn't a goal by itself. So we could get along, for example, with our teachers and all the people in the school, all the staff and everybody, but we still spent half our time in the hallways because we were expelled from class, because we were fooling around a lot. So what we were trying to do, or really what we were doing, was we were testing the limits of the school system, of the classroom, of the teacher's patience every time, each day, and thereby we were kind of rebelling already. You could also say that we were just annoying kids, but for the sake of this story, I'm going to go with the former. Right, so yeah, testing the limits, I was just there. Before high school, both our parents, so Brent and my parents, they were entrepreneurs. Brent's parents, they had a real estate agency, and my parents had a restaurant. And because of that, they often worked long hours, odd hours, and they were always basically just working. And because of that, whenever they had a social theme or whatever, a party, a dinner that they could attend to, even despite of work, they would usually just drag us kids along. So this meant that as a small child, you would have to go to a party where there were no other kids, and there were adults, which you got to talk to, which was pretty cool. And then you got to stay up late, which felt pretty special. And then eventually you were put to bed, but the bed was made out of 2 lawn chairs, and it was right next to the music system. But you slept through it anyway, like a champ, and it felt very, very glamorous. Now, maybe as I'm telling you this right now, it sounds a bit dumb, but as a kid, this is cool. This is cool stuff. So what our parents did with this was they weren't trying to get us all out of our regular system or anything. They weren't doing this weekly. They just they felt that it helped if they took us kids to these occasions where we could, embrace and then experience what else there was outside of, your regular bedtime at home, going to bed at 7, watching maybe some Sesame Street. And we knew as kids that when we got to go to one of these things that we had to behave, be on our best behavior, be very kind and polite to all the adults that were there, and then maybe next time we'd be asked back. Otherwise, we'd be left at home. Right, the same thing went on with mandatory school vacations, right? Like the summer school vacation period. For example, that was the busiest time of year for my parents because they had a restaurant. So that was the time when everybody would come to the restaurant, spend their money, when all the tourists came to town. So it was the busiest time. This was a time when my parents would always want to work, and I usually try to help them during those times. And I went too fast. For Brent's parents, kind of the same thing went on because their employees, they had kids themselves, so they would always take these mandatory school vacations as their school vacations, meaning Brent's parents had to work these periods twice as hard because otherwise the business would be stuck during the summer, right? So this meant that for us as kids, we never went on school holidays during school holidays. So we always had to go outside of these holidays. Now, this sounds fun, but it has a small problem, meaning that it's illegal. And so you had to get a little creative. So usually it would just be something like I had to have a cough in class, and then my mom would come pick me up. She'd say, "Oh, he's sick," and we'd drive straight to the airport, and then we'd fly to Italy. And and then we'd have to call in from Italy a couple of times and tell the school principal or whoever that I was still very much sick and that I would be out for at least a week. And this, again, it wasn't that our parents did this because they thought that they were special or that they were outside of the law or anything or that they were better than other people. Not at all. They made us work ahead with homework. They made us, they made sure that our grades had to be good before we were allowed to do such a thing. They, all of those things. They made sure we didn't miss anything important during the time that we weren't in school. So they were telling us a message like, look, this is how we have to do this because the summertime's our busiest period. That's when we make our money. And that's when everybody else gets to go on holiday so that we can go some other time, and that way the system is in balance, right? They taught us that it's okay to sometimes look for a different route in life to achieve the goals that you have in mind. And the goals, in this case, just being, being able to enjoy a vacation as an entrepreneur, being able to enjoy a social life as an entrepreneur. So that were the two cases that I just mentioned. Right, so what they taught us was, you have to try to create your own system if you want to be on your own as an entrepreneur, but you shouldn't be bothering anyone else with it. And anyone else, in this case, excludes people that were tasked with, enforcing school rules, because let's just not talk about those people here. Right, so they were assessing risks always before taking them, but they were never avoiding risks altogether, right? And they taught us to question things. So if there's a system or an idea or a rule in place, and you can't see the logic behind it, question it. And if you think you can go around it without harming anyone, without bothering anyone, you might give it a shot. Very awkward to drink with a mic on. Yeah. Right. So, yeah. Back to entrepreneurship. Most people become an expert at something and then figure out that, hey, I'm doing this for somebody else now, or I have become an expert at my job doing it for somebody else. Why don't I do this for myself? And this is a very logical way of reasoning. Brent and I were not this way. We had no particular skill set at all. We just figured we knew at very early on that we didn't want to work for anybody else. So we went from a different starting point. So what we did was we, after we came out of our studies, the first thing obviously that we did was we applied for jobs, because we still felt that in order to become an entrepreneur someday, we wanted to have some basic knowledge. We had to have some real world knowledge at some real world companies to see, how they perform, how they do things, and also to see that we would be doing things a lot better and also in a much more fun way. We applied for jobs, both found jobs. Brent started working at a startup within a company that he'd worked for before. I started working as a account manager at a secondment agency. And in all honesty, the whole idea of entrepreneurship was put on the back burner for the first few years out of college. But as it turns out, as soon as we started working, we found that you work for somebody else and you get all kinds of rules thrown at you. For example, I was as I said, an account manager. I had targets, I had goals each year that I had to achieve in my work, and I always went over target. I always outperformed what I had to do. I was a great team player. I did everything right, basically, and I got along very well with my manager back then. So I had a great time at my job, and honestly, this was a bit of a reason why the whole entrepreneurship thing had faded to the background a little bit. But after year one, management changed, and a bunch of management layers in the company that I was in then were added for, reasons I won't go into right now. But what that meant was, even though that I had gone over target with everything I needed to do, I didn't even get the raise that I was promised the year before. So I started getting a little demotivated with, just the way things were going with the company. Also, I had tons of ideas for the company always that I presented to the team first, and then I went to my manager with those ideas, and then my manager would say, hey, look, this works. Why don't we present this to the owners or whatever and get these implemented? It will be great for business. And as soon as those extra layers of management were implemented in the company, this became nearly impossible because you now had to go to your first manager, then your second one, and then your third. And by the time you got to the level where you needed to be, 90% of your ideas were already shot down. So I lost interest altogether. And it fed back into the rebellion that we felt before, that we had before, right? The whole idea of we want to do this whole thing for ourselves. So, and Brent was on I wouldn't say the same path, but he had a similar experience. And so we came back to the Friday beers, as you do in the first years of your job. And we started talking about business ideas again. And, we started assessing. Are we, do we have complementary skill sets to be starting a company if we're going to do this? Well, more or less. Brent had experience in operations and finance. I did a little bit of marketing and sales. We said, sure. Would it be a good idea to start a company together as close friends? Probably not. Do we have any knowledge of a beverage industry or the field that we'd be looking at? Absolutely no. Do we feel that we want to go out and make this happen, that we want to take the paths of our lives in our own hands right now? Yes, certainly. We were getting ready to jump, right? So that is a tipping point. And a tipping point is something that I should have mentioned before, but I didn't. It's something that is very crucial. It is when you have felt these feelings throughout your life. At some point, it stacks up and you come to a point where you just have to go all in. And that is what I want to talk about next. For us, this meant we saw something happening in the United States, which was hard seltzer, which had become, it was a new drinks category. It became so big in such a short amount of time that even it reached the Dutch headlines of the Dutch newspapers, the financial newspapers. So it was something that we felt close to because it was alcohol. And us fresh out of college, we still had great warm feelings to alcohol bringing people together, right? So we just went past that tipping point. We went all in, put our savings together, came up with a name, and just went for it. Now, I'll have to abbreviate here. What are the takeaways that you can take from all of this? I just want to tell you, if this story has resonated with you, even at all, then don't ignore the signs, right? If these things apply to you, if you think, hey, I thought that way as well, don't let that just be something. Lean into that. Get everything together. Make sure you get some real-world experience. or that you become an expert at something before you feel that you're ready. But, make sure that you are there where you want to be. And then if you're there, try your ideas, test them with an audience, with a crowd. Make sure that everybody's heard of them and that you feel that you're certain you want to go this way. And then go past that point of no return. What was his name again? Henry Ford once said, whether you think you can or you can't, you're probably right. And it is something that, well, Paul has mentioned this as well. You shouldn't ignore the feelings that you have inside you. Kiki Ayers did a TED Talk, which is a very good one, and she said, entrepreneurs want their freedom so bad, they'd rather work 24 hours a day for themselves than 8-hour days for somebody else. And there's a strong message in that. And finally, if you've been on the edge with this, by the way, if you haven't been on the edge, if this story has not resonated with you at all, then that's perfectly fine. But the world definitely doesn't need 7 billion people doing all kinds of different things. That would be hectic. But if it does resonate with you, there is only one way to find out, and that is by doing it. As the great Wayne Gretzky said, you miss 100% of the shots that you didn't take. Thank you.